ensuring supportive regulatory frameworks by empowering young entrepreneurs. Our main priority as the South African Youth Trade Association is to promote sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development, and which we aim also to create pathways for young entrepreneurs to participate in the global economy. The South African Youth Trade Association is to ensure that we accelerate a meaningful youth participation through capacity building, stakeholder engagement, accessibility, identifying youth business, and policy advocacy. As trade is a fundamental economic concept which involves the business of buying and selling commodities, products, services, which plays a vital role in our sectors to contribute much in our GDP. A focus on a meaningful participation by all groups of society is a priority, including marginalized groups such as women in trade, including policies by making processes that can contribute to achieving inclusive and sustainable growth and development. The World Trade Organization recognizes the role of the youth in trade and the importance of empowering young people to participate in trade. The World Trade Organization dedicated a high-level panel to interrogate challenges facing the youth in global trade. The Director General of the World Trade Organization admitted that one of our major challenges it faces today is inclusivity. How rules can be simplified so that startups and micro and small medium enterprises, which are mostly owned by young people around the world, can reap benefits of trade. According to the International Trade Center, youth are 1.6 times more likely to start businesses than those who are above 35 years old. Another teleblog discusses how to increase youth entrepreneurship in South Africa. However, young entrepreneurs in South Africa and other developing countries continue to face a wide range of bottlenecks that constrain their capacity to participate and benefit in trade. It is important to remember that trading environment in the next 10 years will be very different from today. How the trading environment evolves will be conditioned on the decision made today. It is their imperative, therefore, to give the youth opportunities to participate in trade policy making, to ensure that there will be policies that will ensure the benefits of trade must be equally distributed and also focus on youth inclusivity, and to remove these barriers to trade that inhibit the integration of youth-led businesses into regional and global value chains. It is the responsibility of today's trade policymakers to listen to the youth and understand their challenges and work with young people to ensure that trade and trade governance contribute more inclusive and sustainable development outcomes. We support the SA government call with regard to extension of AGOA. We support that a long-term extension beyond 10 years should be considered, as well as a long-term for the implementation of AGOA to provide policy market certainty for investment in youth-led businesses that can supply the US market. And we also had a submission on AGOA and or EMCA, which was that AGOA has been a great tool to foster economic growth and development in Africa. It also been a catalyst for the growth in the trade and investment industries in both the US and Africa through the import and export. Subsequently, it has contributed and expanded to the socio-economic development status of Africa and South Africa, to be precise, through a job creation. However, the economic growth has been minute. This is because AGOA is a single market, and this places South Africa's exporters in a vulnerable position when US trade policies change. By these words, colleagues, this is my open remarks. I would like to thank you very much for honoring this session and looking also forward from the presentation and looking also from the message from the Honorable Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President. I'm going to move on to the Deputy Minister from DTIC, Honorable Andrew Whitfield. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and apologies, we were having some technical issues, to the point that I was Parks Tower for one moment. The Minister's not with us today. It is me, and it's a great honor to be here this afternoon. To the President of the South African Youth Trade Association, Mr. Luyolo Dwesi, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and engage you all on the important issue of trade and sustainable trade in particular. The Government of National Unity is fully committed to rapid, inclusive economic growth and job creation. In fact, this is an apex priority in our medium-term development plan, which emanated out of the Cabinet Lekgotla a few weeks ago. As the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, our key focus is on stimulating manufacturing growth in order to build an export-oriented economy. The role of sustainable trade in this regard is critical as it involves promoting economic development, social welfare, and environmental stewardship through international trade. Its goal is to minimize the adverse negative effects of trade, such as pollution, resource depletion, and inequality, while enhancing positive effects such as income, employment, and education. Sustainable trade is not only about the products, but also about the processes and policies that govern them according to the World Economic Forum. The department endeavors to contribute to sustainable trade through export promotion initiatives that foster inclusive economic growth, support youth entrepreneurship, contribute to retaining and creating jobs, whilst addressing the environmental and social challenges of the country, the continent, and the world. The department's approach to sustainable trade, therefore, focuses on providing youth entrepreneurs with the tools and platforms necessary to enter international markets. Through supporting youth participation in these platforms that connect them with international buyers, the branch, specifically the trade branch, aims to promote balanced trade. This ensures that youth-led businesses can compete fairly and sustainably on a global scale, contributing to equitable trade. A key strategic initiative in support of youth is through market access and trade facilitation of youth-led businesses. The department supports participation in international trade missions and fairs that focus on sustainable products, giving export-ready youth entrepreneurs a platform to showcase their innovative products to a global audience. An example of such an event is the Biofetch, a trade show in Germany that offers a platform to showcase organic products, discuss industry trends, and promote sustainable agriculture. In the area of exporter development, the department has also introduced specialized training programs that are specifically designed to meet the needs of young entrepreneurs to scale up their export readiness. These programs cover critical areas such as market research, market entry strategies, export regulation, the use of digital tools to enhance trade. We are committed to equipping our youth with the skills and knowledge they need to compete and succeed globally. The training is complemented by mentorship and coaching from those who have walked this path before to help entrepreneurs to navigate cultural and regulatory challenges and maximize opportunities in international markets. Through the Export Help Desk, the branch also facilitates access to information and resources to equip SMMEs with the market intelligence, trade data, and resources they need to make informed decisions about entering and thriving in global markets. South Africa has several trade agreements and trade arrangements in place that offer significant opportunities for South African businesses. Initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and our partnerships within our BRICS partners are gateways to new markets. On this note, it is important to reflect on the fact that the median age on the African continent is just 19 years old. The future of Africa's export-led growth and intercontinental trade is intrinsically linked to Africa's youth. In that regard, the department, through outreach programs, supports our youth-owned and SMME businesses to take full advantage of these opportunities. These agreements provide a pathway for our young entrepreneurs to access new markets, increase their competitiveness, and scale their operations on an international level. In today's world, digital tools and e-commerce are essential for opening up global markets. As such, the department is also scaling up support initiatives that encourage digital literacy and the adoption of technology in business operations. This will enable our youth to compete effectively in the global digital economy and take full advantage of the opportunities it offers. I would argue that this is a strategic advantage for young people who are au fait with technology to potentially outcompete their competitors. Furthermore, digital platforms are also leveraged to connect seasoned and youth entrepreneurs with international buyers who are interested in eco-friendly and environmentally responsible goods and services. As a parting comment, I would just say that often when we talk about trade policy with many people, maybe outside of the environment, their eyes will glaze over. And I would leave you with this one comment that I like to use, and that is that many people may not be interested in trade policy, or you may not be interested in trade policy, but trade policy is increasingly taking an interest in you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you at this capacity building workshop. The DTIC remains a committed partner to supporting young entrepreneurs towards our objective of building an export-oriented economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Deputy Minister. I am moving to Mr. Thompson to do a presentation from the International Trade Institute of Southern Africa. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Beauty. And thank you to everybody in participation today. I think it's quite clear that the International Trade Institute of Southern Africa is very much in the support of youth participation in trade, and ultimately their contribution towards growing the exporter base in this country, which again has far-reaching ramifications for social impact. What I want to share with you today is some of the resources and tools that the International Trade Institute of Southern Africa can provide our youth in trade, and specifically the South African Youth Trade Association. Okay, let me get this up for you. All right. So to begin, maybe just a little bit about ATRISA, who we are. The International Trade Institute of Southern Africa has been operating for nearly 28 years now. It was registered as a non-profit company in '97 and founded by EXCO members of the previous South African Foreign Trade Organization that many will know, and maybe not within this call, but definitely within the Minister's office. The South African Foreign Trade Organization was called SAFTO. We also registered with the Department of Higher Education and Training as a private higher education institution. We're also the only international trade training organization in Africa with international accreditation. Okay. In terms of the overall ATRISA offering, we offer an internationally accredited 3-year diploma in international trade management. We assist the private sector optimize their import-export functions through our consultancy practice. We also ideate, design, and implement trade development programs for the private and public sector to boost trade with Africa. The resources that I'd like to discuss with the organization today in the context of capacitation is the TFSA Trade and Information Hub with trade tools and resources integrated. We've also built the School of Export websites, as well as the fully integrated learner management system with various amounts of automation and data collection developed there as well. So in terms of the overall agenda for my presentation, I'll take you through an introduction to the School of Export. I'll highlight some key learning outcomes of capacitation through the School of Export. And then I'll also introduce you to some additional resources that the South African Youth Trade Association can leverage. All right, so on to the School of Export. All right, the School of Export was part of a 27 million rand program that ATRISA and the UK government were involved in. ATRISA has since taken over all the resources produced within the context of that program, which does include the School of Export. The online School of Export is a fully integrated learner management system. It houses 28 modules of exporter training, covering the entire export life cycle. We also, in terms of how the learning practically takes place, we have video lectures embedded within each module with content backed by ATRISA. We also have built in various interactions through the online modules, including quizzes that are intended to reinforce learning. From an organizational perspective, we have also built in bulk communication and filtering functionality, meaning the South African Youth Trade Association could filter content to apply particularly to a certain demographic and a certain age profile. We've also built in automated marketing and messaging functionality. Again, this could be based on a demographic. So, for example, we'd automate specific messaging to go out to users under a certain age, within a certain sector, within a certain country, etc. There's also extensive data collection functionality built into the system, giving the South African Youth Trade Association the ability to aggregate data, collect data specifically to their members, etc. All right. The course that I'd like to discuss with you today, because I believe it's the starting point around any international trade ambitions, is the Export Foundation training course. Okay. In module 1 of the School of Export, you'd be introduced to the global trade environment. Okay. In that context, it will cover things like the level of industrialization with a country, how that determines what they trade. It will introduce you to barriers to entry, tariff and non-tariff barriers, and also give you the context necessary to understand how the global trade environment has shaped today, including the input of multilateral organizations like the International Chamber of Commerce, the various rules and sets that they've brought to the table to ease and simplify trade. We then have module 2, which is determining your company's export readiness. This will assess operational capabilities. It will introduce you to the importance of managerial commitment towards a trade initiative. It will also highlight some of the financial structures that are important to consider when embarking on your export journey. In addition to the export readiness module, we also have the built-in export readiness assessment tool. This will actually give you a practical resource to go through various elements of your business and understand what needs to be rectified, what gaps need to be plugged, and what considerations need to be made long-term. Module 3 is an introduction to international marketing. This will highlight some of the differences between domestic sales versus international sales. Okay. It will also take you through how to construct an export marketing plan, key considerations to make in the context of barriers to entry, etc. Okay. Sorry, is everybody still with me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Thank
you. Yes, sir.
All right. Let's have a look here. Okay. All right. Then on to module 4, housed within the School of Export. This is understanding the export administration process. Okay. What it will highlight is the parties involved in an international trade transaction, the tasks involved, and most importantly, the documents involved in international trade. As you'll soon begin to learn, international trade is all about documentation. Tasks are only completed if sufficient documentation is involved. And in the context of competitiveness from South Africa, it's vitally important that we get documentation right the first time, because it can avoid major delays long term. Okay. This will also introduce you to the typical export process flow, all the way from inquiry to feasibility studies, through to delivering your goods, through to customs clearance, etc. Okay. Module 5 is choosing an appropriate transport service. What you'd be looking at with the various transport services is having a look at how your goods align with various transport services available, whether it be bulk, break bulk, or containerized goods. There are individual considerations to make on each. The choice of a transport service also has a massive bearing on the effective price that you're able to charge your customers and your overall competitiveness as a whole. Okay. Module 6 will be taking you through the Incoterms 2020 rules. You'll be introduced to the concept of Incoterms in Module 1 already, understanding the global trade environment and the contribution that Incoterms has made to trade today. Okay. Incoterms stands for International Commercial Terms, but the reality of it is a better name for it would probably be INDAL terms, because it relates entirely to delivery and delivery alone. There are 11 Incoterms at this stage, ranging from the least risk to the exporter to the most risk to the exporter, i.e. X works versus DDP. And Incoterms, they play a major role in not only your delivery mechanisms or your logistics, but in the negotiation of your overall sales contract. All right. Essentially, what Incoterms do is they prescribe certain costs, responsibilities, and risks to either buyer or seller, depending on where the consignment is within the transaction. Okay. Then we move over to Module 7, which is managing export financial risk. I can tell you this from personal experience in the various export development programs that we run. Export financial risk and the international financial management task is something that needs aggressive attention in the South African context. Export financial risk could be anything from buyer to country risk to exchange risk. Okay. I think it's important that we understand as exporters from South Africa, exporting is actually easy, okay? Exporting at the most competitive price with the least risk, that's the hard part. And unfortunately, that's the part that determines your competitiveness overall. Whether you're looking at items like forward cover, okay, CFC accounts to mitigate against exchange risk, export credit insurance, or even various payment methods to mitigate against against buyer risk. For example, letters of credit, bank guarantees. You have to have that overall understanding of the various export financial risk in order to make the right decisions as an exporter. Okay. Moving on, we have just added an additional module to the Export Foundations course. This is product classification utilizing the WCO's harmonized system of nomenclature. The HS system is, again, something that is extremely misunderstood amongst the exporter base. Okay, there are various rules to classification, and they are hierarchical. For example, if Rule 1 does not work, you go to Rule 2, Rule 3, Rule 4, and eventually Rule 5 and 6. Okay, the HS code in the context of international trade is vitally important, not only from the customs perspective, but also understanding the various duties, taxes applicable when you're shipping your goods to an international market. It is a 6-digit code, okay? The 6 digits are internationally recognized, meaning the 6 digits for the same product will be the same in every country in the world. You do have some countries that add additional digits to the HS code. For example, the US is famous for going up to 10 digits in the classification of their products. This is directly linked to tariff systems and tariff books. So it's vitally important that you know how, and your stakeholders know exactly how to classify their goods before embarking on an export journey. Linked to that is international customs practices. Okay, ultimately, dealing with customs is an integral part of international trade. Often your ability to deal with customs effectively dictates a lot of your costs as well. All right. A famous thing in the South African context, and I know this again from operating within the export development space, we tend to measure exports as goods on the water. Okay, so any exports leaving the country is good exports. The reality is that if you are not dealing with international customs correctly, often those goods get turned back and they come back to South Africa because either customs documentation, customs valuation, customs declarations, etc., are done incorrectly. It's vitally important that we understand those practices and abide by them in order to be competitive. Okay. That wraps up the Export Foundations courses that are modules that are available within the School of Export. However, once you've completed Export Foundations, there also is advanced topics to move on to. Okay. For example, we have a module specifically on cargo insurance. We have another module on contracts for the carriage of goods internationally, understanding the legal ramifications of that. We've also done a module on contracts of agency and distributorship. Again, negotiating a distributor agreement versus an agency agreement has various nuances that need to be taken into consideration. Another one I probably see as one of the most important modules that we've done to date is costing for export. Again, costing for export requires a deep understanding of Incoterms. When you cost for export, you are costing normally to three different you're costing to three different Incoterms. Okay, and again, taking into consideration the various costs, risks, and responsibilities in that regard is important in your costing exercise. We then have a module dedicated entirely to currency exchange issues. Again, this is the mitigation of exchange risk. I know this again from personal experience dealing with an export development program we're running at the moment. This can make a massive difference to the bottom line of exporters in South Africa and ultimately their competitiveness. We have found that almost all of our participants within the current program could save money had they implemented the right foreign exchange risk mitigation mechanisms. All right, and we're talking about, the difference between 400,000 Rand profit versus 400,000 Rand loss. So again, that needs to be taken into consideration. Then we have customs valuation. There's two parts to customs valuation. It is a sometimes misunderstood exercise. The unfortunate part about it is if there is incorrect customs valuation submitted to SARS, you will have issues. Okay, it exposes you to regulatory risk, even in a domestic context. We then have export credit insurance and how that can be leveraged, again, to mitigate the risk of an export transaction, particularly into Africa. We also have a module on financing an export drive. There are various mechanisms to finance an export drive. I think what's often misunderstood in the South African context is we tend to think of SMEs having not got access to the funding mechanisms needed to grow their exports. However, the reality is that there's a lot of funding dedicated towards exports. You need to know where to look and what you need to be applying for. When we talk about financing an export drive, it could be pre-shipment finance, post-shipment finance. It could even be various factoring facilities that you can utilize through commercial banks, and the thresholds. And again, knowing this, having done quite a bit of work with the financial sector in South Africa in the context of trade, the thresholds for things like discounting and factoring services have come down significantly in the past decade. So those are now accessible to small and medium-sized enterprises. We then also have a module around international contracts, okay? When they come into being, key considerations to be made, how to actually enforce international contracts, the importance of inserting a jurisdiction to govern a particular contract are all covered in that module. We also then have international sales negotiation. People tend to think that an international sales negotiation is the same as selling a Vodacom package. There is a lot more consideration that needs to be taken place there. For example, a sales negotiation plan for international markets, taking into consideration the cultural aspects, key concessions that you might be asked to make, etc., is something that we cover within that module. We then also have locating potential buyers, where we cover traditional forms of locating potential buyers, whether it's trade show participation, outbound sales missions, inbound sales missions, etc. And then we also have a look at digital mechanisms for locating potential buyers, the importance of having a digital presence in the international market, how buying habits of international buyers, particularly in developed markets like the US, the UK, and the EU, have changed over the last decade. You know, whereas a website in the past was a nice to have for a lot of export businesses, it's an absolute necessity now. We run through a couple of those dynamics within that module. We then also have a look at packing and marking for international transit. Again, there are various factors that need to be considered when packing and marking for international transit. You know, is it a perishable good? Is it a dangerous good? Those all come with prescribed recommendations on packing and marking, okay, which is covered within that module. As I mentioned, the importance of documentation in international trade. Okay, we have a module entirely dedicated to preparing international trade documentation. Just on this, on a typical export transaction, you're looking at between 30 to 50 different pieces of documentation in order to conclude that export process. So again, it's important that we understand the various documentation that needs to be completed and how to do it accurately. We then also have a module dedicated entirely to processing the buyer's order. Again, this takes you through things like production planning. Again, having worked with a number of exporters in the country, a lot of the times we get so excited about a potential deal on the table, we say, absolutely, we can deliver in 60 days, not understanding other considerations that need to be made in that process. Processing the buyer's order will take you through those various factors. And then producing quotations and pro forma invoices. Accurate production of a quotation or pro forma invoice can avoid significant delays down the road and mitigate against a number of risks you face in the international market. However, it is not the same as quoting in the domestic market. There are other considerations that need to be made and need to be accounted for. The producing quotations and pro forma invoices module will take you through those various elements. And finally, we've got the contract of sale or purchase, again, mitigating against legal exposure. And then we have the overall international legal environment. A module that we also have recently added is the UK SACU-M Economic Partnership Agreement. This outlines the applicability of this agreement to South African exporters. It outlines the mechanisms in order to benefit from such an agreement and key considerations to be made when doing so. Okay. As I mentioned, the Trade Forward Southern Africa program was a program that AfCFTA had done in partnership with the UK government. We have now taken it over in its entirety, and the goal is absolutely expansion for the platform and for the resources. Okay. Overall, AfCFTA's mission is to support the export support ecosystem by leveraging the existing platforms as a resource that donor funders, government agencies, export councils, industry bodies, and trade service providers can leverage for maximum impact and a single point of call. All right, I'll just stop the share. Just to conclude here, if you look at the export support ecosystem, not only in a South African context, but an African context, we have various role players that understand that trade plays a vital role in the development of economies. Okay. However, what we have at the moment is we have donor funders coming in, or various organizations coming in to Africa, offering support with an immense amount of cost duplication. Often these programs run in 3-year cycles, which means that resources are only available for 3 years. It was a big selling point for AfCFTA when getting involved in the Trade Forward Southern African program, was that this would be a resource that's here to stay and can be continuously developed upon. Okay. The system currently has over 7,000 registered users, and we want to make it available to the South African Youth Trade Association. In that lens, we would also be willing to offer some additional support in terms of data collection, onboarding of particular cohorts for the organization, and of course, disseminating any additional developments that take place. We're currently in conversation with USAID around the development of a digital trade consultant, which is something we're actively pursuing. Again, that will automatically be made available to the network utilizing the School of Export and Trade and Information Hub. Right. In addition to that, AfCFTA does offer also various short courses, facilitated short courses. We run in-company short courses, and again, happy to help the development of youth in trade as far as possible. How can you access the School of Export? It's very simple. I'll be sending out the link to everyone on the call. You can sign up for free. It's a completely free resource. And you will immediately have access to all 28 modules housed in the School of Export, as well as the additional material that's available there as well. In the context of what your organization is trying to achieve, I think a starting point is definitely for the structure of the South African Youth Trade Association to complete that training. And again, as I mentioned, happy to assist where I can. Thank you, Beauty. I think that's all for me. I think I might have ran over as well. But happy to answer some questions in the Q&A, which I'll be facilitating. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thompson. Perhaps just for the meeting to note, we are joined by Mrs. Mandu Malane from SALGA, and also the minister's left the meeting. He has a commitment in Parliament. We are moving on to the presentation by DTIC, Mr. Andre from the Eastern Cape Regional Office. Over to you, Mr. Andre.
Thank you, Beauty. Just a brief introduction. I'm Andre Legrandse. I'm from the Department of Trade and Industry. Yes, I am based in the Eastern Cape, but we are national department. So yeah, so it's my honor to, or it's a privilege for me to present here today. Let me just see if I can share my screen quickly. That's where I am. Just give me a second. Is my screen on?
Yes.
It is indeed.
Okay. Okay, cool. Sorry, guys, I will be quite brief, right? What I will do is, firstly, I want to introduce the DTIC for those who don't know who we are. We are a little department in national government that's through our name, Department of Trade Industry. We look after both the policy and we look at the instruments to support our exporters. The Minister, Deputy Minister Whitfield has touched on a lot of key issues that I think is quite important. But just when we think of the DTIC, you see we are quite a broad industry, people, a broad department. These are our agencies. ITAC, which deals with specifically with trade issues, Export Credit Council, also part of our agency. So you can see basically DTIC, don't think of us as one-dimensional funders. We have our agencies which we can also leverage. But specifically who I am and where I sit, I'm in I don't know if my screen is blocked here quickly. Oh, let me just get rid of this quickly. There we go. Yeah. So within the broader DTIC, you can see we got ministers from the Ministry's office. I'm basically in the industrial financing division within DTIC. Essentially what we do here, we are the funding guys, but you can see DTIC, we have many other units on trade policy, on inward investment attraction through Invest SA. So I think I just put it here to show, look at DTIC, besides the agencies, we are quite broad in our structures. But that said, our focus and our objectives remain, it's very clear. We are here to promote jobs and rising incomes through increased industrialization. Very big part of our work is transformation of our economy, of participants in our economy, specifically amongst youth and youth-owned enterprises. And lastly, is there to ensure, to help create a capable state, to ensure improved impact of our existing policies. Yes, we have policies in place, but we're here to make sure how do we action those. So those are the kind of the key legs on which DTIC stands. Coming back to where I'm from the IFB, Industrial Finance branch. We have two broad objectives: to support industrial development, which would ultimately enhance our local productivity and our competitiveness, and as well to support and contribute to accelerated growth of the manufacturing and internationally traded services by South African companies. How we do that? We've got various incentive programs, which I put you in clusters. We have those that look after manufacturing, the manufacturing investment cluster, which is largely looks how can we capacitate our entities to become more competitive. We do those through 4 programs across black industrials, automotive, agro-processing, aquaculture, and general manufacturing. Those that look after innovation, specifically amongst youth-owned entities, services, whether it's outward business processing services. We have incentives for those to support infrastructure development. And important and of relevance here is we have incentives specifically targeted to promote exports, not only amongst existing, but also emerging exporters. As just to expand on this, these are a few of the programs we do currently have. We have those under the innovation cluster. We have those that looking at skills development for skills for industries and to support the development thereof. Those promoting innovation under manufacturing. We've got a few programs there as well as through the IDC, through services. We offer a bouquet of incentives there as well under export promotion, which I will touch on a bit more later. We have 3 core programs and also under infrastructure development. We have ours, through our special economic zones. We support them financially and investors there for existing entities who need infrastructure upgrading. We're providing funding there, and also through revitalizing our various industrial parks across South Africa. So that's to give you an overview of our incentive clusters. If I go through all of them, we will be here till 7 tonight. So I'm just going to touch on more on the export cluster. As the DTIC, yes, we don't do loans through our units. We do grants and through incentives, which I touched on the slide B4. When we say DTIC, can you provide us funding? Through our grants, we're looking for specific and targeted outcomes. Our grants it's not repayable. It's to offset your investment. As Minister pointed out, is to support productive and manufacturing sectors. Yes, we do startups. We look at companies expanding. Here are companies looking to upgrade their services. We have funding for those. And I think very key for us is the quality of your business case. That is a determinant factor. As I always say, I've seen good projects presented badly, and I've seen bad projects presented expertly. So I think when we look at these, how we determine how we support projects, it's about it's the quality of the business case put forward. We look at your economic viability, your technical viability. And one thing with DTIC, our funding is not 100%. It's always on a cost-sharing basis, so we offset certain costs that you incur. The kind of costs we do cover, we look at mostly your capital expenditure in expansion or startups. Yeah, so but I think these are just the overarching rules of how our projects work. Sorry, of how our programs work, and there may be deviances according to the specific program. What we ask for in return, yes, we said we provide grants. What we ask for, we look at projects and we score projects based on their employment market share, localization, regional empowerment. Specifically, how are you including previously marginalized individuals, as well as specifically youth-owned entities. So though we don't say, you know what, we have a specific youth-owned, sorry, a youth-focused incentive, all of our programs has elements to promote it, to promote the inclusion of youth-owned entities. So yeah, so that just gives you an overview of what we look for besides your business case, how it contributes towards these following 8 factors. Specifically on trade, this is what I'm just introducing this. We have 2 incentives here. We have one that's focused on export marketing. I think there in the name, how can we assist individuals to take South African products out? There's, I think, there's so many elements to this. We look at companies looking, I want to enter X markets. I need to do primary market research. The DTIC provides funding for that. For those projects, for entities looking to attract FDI, we can support you there financially. For inward missions, outward missions, we provide the funding for those. What we do cover for you, we cover your airfares, your subsistence allowances, transportation of samples, marketing costs. So there's a lot of costs we do cover, because at the end of the day, we are interested in supporting entities that's taking our products out. So that is from an individual point of view. For emerging exporters, you know, here are companies that haven't exported before. How can we support them? And I think this is why we have the sector-specific program, where we look at emerging exporters, guys that need market exposure. This is where we would say, you know what, as a group of exporters, how can we support you? We do this via export councils, JAGs, joint action groups, industry associations, and economic development agencies. Here we would say emerging exporters who can't upfront. ECDC, Westgrow, GGDA, can you support these emerging exporters to expose themselves to export markets, where we will cover your transport fees, your travel costs. So this is just a highlight of 2 programs that we have that is specifically export focused. My closing remarks is quite, I'm keeping quite brief. The DTIC and SAYTA, we've been engaging regularly, but I think we are, and we view you as a strategic partner in the development of the economy, specifically among youth-owned enterprises. Yes, we've been engaging regularly, but I think we should enhance our collaboration across all our agencies and our programs, ultimately to increase investment and share investment intelligence. And I will say this, we are representing various agencies here. Silo thinking needs to be eradicated if we want to achieve our joint strategic objectives. DTIC, we have a sphere of influence which is broad, as you can see, through our agencies, through our programs, from a policy, trade perspective. Please use that, proactively leverage it. Keep us accountable if we're not supporting you. And more importantly, which I see as an issue that I need to raise, we need to also work closely, not just with DTIC, with our development institutions. They should be drawn in, because we recognize them. Yes, SAYTA, we will say they're not eligible for group support, but let's work with agencies that are. How can we support our emerging exporters, specifically youth-owned enterprises, to access markets? Our funding programs are there, and all I want to say is that we are very much open. This is a beginning of a discussion on our side. We don't look back and says we've done this. I'm of the opinion we can do more, and I think for all of us, how can DTIC assist? Leverage us. We are there. We have finance available to capacitate you, to expose you, and at the end of the day is, we have it here. I'm here to assist. Yes, I'm here in the Eastern Cape. I see Loyolo and his team regularly. but we're also national. It's not just whether you're in the Western Cape, Gauteng, Northern Cape. I work across all provinces, and I'm here to provide the technical support for you to access both our services and the financial services we can provide you. Yes, that's me. Sorry, guys, I was aware of the of my time constraints, so I flew through my presentation, but I'm here for Q&A. Afterwards, if there's any specific areas of clarity that you do require from the DTIC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andre. We are moving on to Nedlac, Mr. Mujalifa.
Good afternoon, BT. Thank you for the opportunity. May I just put up my slide? I'm just putting up my slides, BT. Please indicate when you can see them. I hope you can see them.
Yes, it's on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again for the opportunity. Let me take this opportunity to greet everyone online. Greet the Deputy Minister in absentia now as he has left the session. Greet everyone who's greet the fellow panelists, greet also all the attendees, and thank the association and its presidents for inviting us. I think we will give a short presentation on Nedlac and the role of Nedlac. Yeah, I think I'm ready to start. Yes, we'll just give a short presentation on Nedlac and its role, and the mandate of Nedlac and how Nedlac works. Maybe let me start with the introduction. In the birth of our democracy in 1994, we would say new model, a new model of resolving political and also workplace conflict was brought into play, and this new models of doing things then saw the participation and acknowledged the role of organized stakeholders. And this new way of doing things then saw the birth of many other institutions. One of those institutions that got its birth at that particular time is Nedlac. Nedlac, fundamentally, it is a vehicle where government, organized labor, organized business, and community organizations seek to cooperate through problem solving and negotiation on economic, labor, and development issues and related challenges that are facing South Africa. Our role and mandate as Nedlac is governed by the Nedlac Act, which gave birth to the institution Nedlac, its constitution, and the various protocols that predict or determine how the Nedlac processes are carried out. What the Nedlac says, what the Nedlac Act says, one, it strives to promote goals of economic growth, participation in economic decision-making, and social equity, seeks to reach consensus and conclude agreements on matters pertaining to social and economic policy, consider all proposed labor legislation relating to labor market policy before it is introduced to Parliament. You'll see that the Nedlac Act differs from social and economic policy, where the social partners, government, business, labor, community, then choose or request which policies are brought to Nedlac. But the Nedlac Act, when it comes to labor legislation, says all proposed labor legislation must be brought and engaged by Nedlac social partners before it is introduced to Parliament. Lastly, the Act says encourage and promote formulation of coordinated policy on social and economic matters. I think that is the difference that I was alluding to now. So slightly what we see today, Nedlac plays more of a role in this regard, in the coordination of social partners, as I've mentioned them, social partners' responses to critical socio-economic issues, negotiation of formal consensus based on agreements on economic and social policy issues, facilitating engagement and negotiations on proposed policy and legislation, conducting information sharing sessions, social dialogues, and on social and economic policies, facilitating collaboration and coordination of social partners on key social issues, and lastly, resolving social economic disputes in terms of Section 77 of the Labor Relations Act. So on the Section 77 on the Labor Relations Act is any dispute that then would be filed by any federation to say, we're in dispute with this employer, whether it government or in the private sector, we're not finding each other, we would like to protect all employees in that particular sector and go on a protected strike, as it may. Membership of Nedlac, as I've said, membership of Nedlac is comprised of organized business, mainly represented by Business Unity South Africa and its associations. Organized labor is represented by COSATU, FEDUSA, and NACTU. Organized community and development interested appointed through the minister without portfolio in the office of the president for nominations by organizations that are interested to be part of community. Those organizations like SANCO and the likes, and the women and the disabled South African organizations. But current membership, we've seen SAFTU recently filed its papers and has officially joined as a labor on organized labor, and community membership has extended to informal workers and cooperatives. When you go to the structure and composition of Nedlac, these are functional structures at Nedlac. Nedlac is governed by its executive council, and it exists, or there exist four chambers within Nedlac, namely the Public Finance and Monetary Chamber, the Trade and Industry Chamber, the Labor Market Chamber, the Development Chamber under the Programs Unit. I'd like to go just a bit into the different chambers. For instance, the Trade and Industry Chamber, which I am a part of, perhaps in my enthusiasm, BT, I didn't even give my title as I began. To the audience, apologies for that. I'll just do that briefly. I am Mujalfa Khatib, as introduced by the Program Director. I am the manager within the Economics Unit at Nedlac, responsible for trade and SMME. So I am housed within the Trade and Industry Chamber. The chamber itself looks at pertinent matters relating to economic and social dimensions of trade, as well as industrial, agricultural, mining, services policy, and associated institutions of delivery. I'll come to the recent work later of the chamber, because there's more I want to spend time on this particular chamber. But let me go to the other chambers. The Labor Market Chamber. The Labor Market Chamber, as I had said before, that it considers all proposed labor legislation relating to the labor market in South Africa before that any of that legislation is introduced to Parliament. The Labor Market Chamber seeks to reach consensus and make arrangements for placing before the Executive Council on all of these matters. Its recent work includes the labor law reforms. When we go to the Development Chamber, then it is mandated to achieve consensus on development-related matters. These may include development matters. These may include, or let me say, on its recent work that the chamber has done, it has looked at the admissions policy that was tabled by the Department of Basic Education, at the expanded public works program policy that was tabled by the Department of Public Works. When I come to the Public Finance and Monetary Policy Chamber, the chamber seeks to reach consensus on issues that pertaining to financial, fiscal, monetary, and exchange rate policy. Some of the recent work by this chamber includes the implementation of the two-pot system, where a task team was developed at Nedlac to look at particularly the implementation side of the two-pot system. And then the chamber itself hosts annual dialogue sessions with the national treasury. These are annual budget dialogue sessions with the national treasury, with the South African Reserve Bank, the social partners, and so forth. Thank you for allowing me to go just a tad bit on those, PT. And then Nedlac is managed by the Secretariat. I'm part of the Secretariat. Today, the structures of Nedlac are as follows. We still have the 4 chambers that I've went to, the Manco task teams that are developed from Manco itself, the rapid response task teams, the Section 77 Socioeconomic Dispute Resolution task team, the Nedlac Annual Summit. The Nedlac Annual Summit will be taking place on the 6th of September. Yeah, I think that is next week. And also recently within the Nedlac structures, we've seen the introduction of the Presidential Climate Commission. The Presidential Climate Commission is a separate entity, but it is housed within Nedlac and uses some of Nedlac services such as finance, HR, and so forth. So we are like one family now with the PCC until it can stand on its own. These are some of the governance structures at Nedlac, EXCO, MENCO, the Audit Risk Committee. I wouldn't spend much time on this, the Human Resource and Ethics Committee. Just to go through some of the work programs of Nedlac in the past financial year, just to show the work that Nedlac has its knees and ankles in. On economic matters, these are some of the bills that were at Nedlac in the past financial year and were then subsequently passed by the President into law. The Conduct of Financial Institution Bill, the Public Procurement Bill, the Electricity Amendment Bill, and the National Nuclear Regulator Amendment Bill. Some of the policies include electricity pricing policy. Some of the dialogue sessions, I will speak also later a bit on dialogue sessions. Some of the dialogue sessions that were within the economics unit include the SMME Crisis Partnership Funding, ESCOM Energy Crisis Plan, the TIC Strategic Plan with the DTIC Minister, the SA Investment Strategy, and the Government Budgeting Planning, which I've alluded to previously, just to mention some of those. And then this is the slide that I would like to speak just a bit more on the work of the unit of the economics unit over the past year. At Teselico, Teselico looks at trade agreements or covers trade-related issues and focuses on all the major trade agreements, including AfCFTA, on WTO, on SADC, as well as CBAM and other protectionist measures such as decarbonization, deforestation regulations, the Inflation Reduction Act by the USA, and green protectionism as a whole. In actual fact, Teselico last week, Wednesday, on the 21st of August, held a dialogue session that particularly looked at CBAM and these other protectionist measures. And we had a wide range of experts in the room just to capacitate our social partners and to further develop a country position on that. Previously, or earlier in the year, we had a Nedlac WTO preparatory workshop that was in preparation for the ministerial conference in Abu Dhabi, where also the Nedlac Secretariat and also the social partners participated together with government at the ministerial conference. Within Teselico, we also look at, Nedlac is now conducting a research on social clauses in trade agreements that would be in trade agreements where South Africa, of course, is a signatory to. These social clauses or labor provisions would include things like South Africa not trading with countries perhaps that uses children labor or jailed labor and such stuff, so that we also protect our own market against markets that would use unfair labor relations, especially looking at South Africa's human rights track record. Just one of our repeat test teams work streams is the freight and public transport. Really, the freight public transport is the work stream is twofold. It looks at improving freight for exports and also looks at public transport to improve public transport in a sense of improving the daily lives of workers and people. Just in the past 2 weeks, we had site visits in Gauteng and in the Western Cape to the PRASA facilities, to see the modernization that is being done by PRASA and how PRASA is getting the trains back on the rail so that people can get to work safer and at an affordable price. The energy security work stream has looked at matters such as just energy transition, the demand side management of energy. And then on the trade and industry and SMMEs, we've looked at employee share owner scheme. I guess colleagues would know that DTIC and government also held a conference on that earlier this year. We look at localization, we look at master plans, as established by the DTIC in the various industries, and how then can social partners through business and labor support those master plans. Look at red tape around SMMEs, and then just going back to Teselico, we've had the engagement with the president of the association, Uluyolo, and we are engaging with our Teselico leads. I think our next formal Teselico meeting will be end of September to have the association as an observer at Teselico, to have an observer status at Teselico. Teselico really, as I've said, that it looks at various trade agreements that South Africa is in, and social partners have a direct input on a line-by-line or theme-by-theme basis, where social partners can then say on AfCFTA, like the recently adopted Women and Youth in Trade Protocol. Social partners did get an opportunity from a South African perspective to have their inputs in that particular protocols and in a whole range of other trade agreements and protocols. Program director, I think this was my main slide. I will just finish off with the other slides. This slide on one of the chambers, the labor market chamber, I've spoken to them. It just shows some of the bills that went to the particular chamber, such as the Public Service Amendment Bill. I won't spend considerable time on those. And still on the labor market, on UIF, it shows how the work stream has inputted in the modernization and turnaround times at UIF. The development chamber, some of the issues at the development chamber, there's a task team on cost of living and rapid response task team to really look at the cost of living. There's been a task team or the bills that have been brought before the development chamber, any matching issues include the Deeds Registries Amendment Bill, the SA Post Office Amendment Bill, and on gender and on National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Bill, and so forth. I will pass those. I've spoken to the Presidential Climate Commission, which sits at Nedlac, and some of the work it does. Nedlac does also capacitate its social partners through various means and ways. I'll just mention a few. Nedlac does fund the annual policy school for organized labor and community, so that it gives them that necessary capacitation. Attendance of labor and community delegates at the ILO Child Labor Conference, leadership training with the University of Pretoria, and electricity pricing policy for organized business. So those are some of the capacity building that Nedlac does provide for its own social partners. We see we've provided capacity building for both for labor, community, and also for business. I just thought I'll just share the satisfactory stakeholder during the past financial year for Nedlac, which was done with various social partners and stakeholders that interact with Nedlac, just to show a few things. On organizational structures, systems, and processes, Nedlac got 78%. On governance, 75%. I think the lowest was 65% on skills and capacity building, which it was the previous slide where I said we do provide capacity building for our social partners, so that the playing level is really leveled, so that when you get government officials who get capacitation at a government level, you also get community institutions and labor delegates equally being up to the task. The Secretariat, just to show that Nedlac is not a big, the Secretariat is not a big institution, or it does not have a lot of people. The Secretariat of Nedlac has 36 people. Now we say we're a staff complementary of over 50, because now we do count the PCC staff as part of our family. And then the Nedlac Secretariat would consist of the leadership, which is the top 4, and most of the colleagues would come from the management level, that is professionals, and then limited administration and office support. And since the advent of COVID, really Nedlac has been operating virtually on a hybrid basis, if I may say, but the physical part would be less than 20%, but we do have meetings that we do host physically still at Nedlac, but the majority of Nedlac engagements would happen online. I think that would be us. Just one more slide, then for the just one more slide. It is on how matters are tabled at Nedlac. So this would be the protocol for tabling and considering issues at Nedlac. I'll go this one through quickly. So the policy or bill will be tabled by social partners. In the main, it would be government, where the Department of Trade and Industry would come and say, or the Department of Small Business, and say, there's the small and cooperative draft policy, and then they would like it to be tabled at Nedlac and engaged at Nedlac. But even business, labor, and community are allowed to say there's this particular policy or bill that we would like to engage on, and then it is then allocated to the responsible chamber, as I've alluded to the chambers, and then a task team is set up in terms of reference agreed, and the time frame between 3 and 6 months, and then a capacity building process can be taken, such as a dialogue session where either government then capacitates or brings information, the relevant information on that particular bill or topic or policy, or a dialogue session you can bring in. Hence I alluded to the dialogue session on CBAM and other protection measures that was held at Nedlac last week, where we brought in a number of expertise to really give their different perspective on these measures. And then there would be the substantive engagement, theme by theme or line by line on that particular policy or legislation. And then they would reach an agreement or a disagreement. Then a Nedlac report will be tabled. The Nedlac report would then show the areas of agreement and the areas of disagreement, if there are any. Then the Nedlac report is approved internally by MANCO. After the approval of the report, then the report is submitted to the relevant minister, and then to the relevant parliamentary committee after that. Chairperson, I've also spoken to the dialogue session, so I will not stay long on this particular slide. The dialogue sessions are really instruments of information sharing, of enhancing capacity of our social partners. I've spoken about even the one that happened last week, so that they can make a meaningful contribution on socio-economic issues which are engaged upon at Nedlac. Yeah, and then I think the next few points just give the different dialogue sessions that we may have, where is a briefing session that is mainly led by government, or a roundtable where we bring a lot of expertise to the forum, and then to have different opinions and expertise in that forum, or a workshop where a specific discussion is debated and need to achieve a certain outcome. Chairperson, program director, with that, I would like to thank you. These are some of my Nedlac colleagues, as you can see them. Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I do hope through the discussions with the Tesseli College, we will have the association having an observer status at Tesselico, which will then bridge the gap between information, particularly on trade agreements and trade agreements that South Africa is part of, and how that process or those processes are taken up, so that that information can then reach particularly youth organizations and women organizations that want to play in that space and understand fully, from starting from where the trade agreements with the different governments, or the different with the different regions such as SACU, SADC, or the Continental Free Trade Area, how they come into being, and the different protocols that then come into play. Program Director, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khadebe. Perhaps just for the meeting to note, Ms. Mandu has left. She has another commitment to attend to. I am officially handing over to Mr. Thompson to handle the Q&A session. However, I have a request to the meeting that we keep our questions precise and straight to the point, because we still have the African Continental Free Trade Area to do the closing remarks to officially close today's capacity building. Mr. Thompson, over to you.
Thank you very much, Beauty. Let me have a look. Okay. All right. If there's anybody that has any questions you'd like to pose, we're happy to field those now. The chat box is also open now. So if you would like to post questions within the chat box, or ask them on the floor directly, if I can just ask that you raise your hand, and I'll come to you. I'm sure representatives from Nedlac would also be willing to offer some answers to particular questions. Loyolo, you've got your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, facilitator. No, mine is a comment. I would like to request all stakeholders that they done presentations to share the presentations via email. Thank you very much.
Will do. Loyolo, will do. Anybody else got a question for either Andre, myself, previous presenter? Yes, go ahead. I think it's Adam. Adam de Lang, your hand is up. I think you're on mute.
Yes, I've just, sorry, seems I'm a bit technology challenged here.
Welcome to the group, Adam.
Thank you guys for a very informative session, and I think a lot of the information that was shared here today is very helpful, and I just wish that so many more SMEs was able to have access to this kind of information. I run a company called Delanga Financial Services, and I work very closely with SMEs across the country. My question is more to Mr. Lagrange of the DTIC. It's a comment and a question. The comment is just thank you for the refreshing approach to this department. I haven't met you personally, but I've met your predecessors, and it is lovely to see such passion and refreshing attitude towards your mandate. So thank you for that. I just wanted to know if because there's so many on your presentation, there's so much information, and there's quite a few questions that I have. If one needs to make contact with you with regards to that information, is it possible to get your contact details? And are you based in Port Elizabeth or East London?
Hi, thank you, Mr. De Lange. I will share with you in the chat, not just my email address, but my mobile number as well, so you can contact me directly. I think there is a lot of information that I glossed over, right? But I'm putting it out here, guys. Yeah, I'm willing to do a deep dive on specific areas if you want clarity, because as I warned, each and every program is probably a 20-minute presentation by themselves. So I'm putting it out there. I am available if we need a follow-up session, whether it's one-on-one, business, or as an organization. I'll gladly avail myself to assist.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Andre. Thank you very much for that. I see there's a question in the chat box. I think it's directed at possibly myself as well as yourself, Loyolo. How would SAYTA ensure regular engagement with the institutions who presented today and vice versa? From my perspective, Sean, I think that Teresa will be having regular engagement with the organization. We also have a planned face-to-face next week where we'll be signing an MOU. And then maybe Loyolo, you can speak to some of the other organizations. I know Andre has already put his email and mobile number in there, so we should have regular engagement there. But Loyolo, maybe something for you to consider, maybe a bi-monthly session like this. But over to you.
No, thank you very much for your question. It was raised by Sean. We will have these programs regularly. We have scheduled build-up programs as we are planning a main program which will take part next year. After this program, we will have an induction and a strategic planning workshop where we'll invite organizations and other strategic stakeholders, including all stakeholders that are here today. And also for young people to reach them easily, we have a data collection that we have done. We have a link that has been distributed, I think started last month already. And there's an increased number of youth-led organization and business that have been submitting to that link. And just to check the percentage of it, yes, the percentage in Free State, we have about 25.8%, and Eastern Cape is 35.5%, and 14.5% at Gauteng. So we have a database that is increasing, and that's how we communicate the incoming programs that we have through our database and also through our website. Thank you very much.
Just on that point, Loyolo, also happy to list the South African Youth Trade Association on the Trade and Information Hub to disseminate your offering broader in the South African context, but we can pick that up next week when we meet. Any other questions for any of the presenters or the structure? Okay. Maybe then I'll pose one to you, Andre. Just in the context of the DTIC, I know that there is priority sectors that have been placed by the DTIC. Can you just run through a couple of the the priority sectors that are key focuses for the DTIC at the moment that could be valuable for the organization structure to focus on?
Thanks, Corbin. I think from the DTIC, generally speaking, our focus is on manufacturing entities. Yes, according to IPAP, we've got 13 sectors that we identified. That is how it currently stands. It's those around the blue economy, clean energy, manufacturing, automotive, agro-processing, business processes. We have specific programs for that. However, when it comes to exports, we're also targeting companies that can provide services as well, qualified services. So I think I don't want to fixate on what we do and what we don't. I think it's more of a conversation, because at the end of the day, it's not about, I think anything or any project or any entity that can support our core objectives, which is job growth, diversity, inclusion, skills development, we will listen to. I may not have it, but through our various organizations, for example, there's some things, for example, I'm a youth-owned entity. I want to buy a franchise. As a grant point of view, we don't, but through the agencies like our NEF, we can.
Yeah.
So I think it's more for us to, and that's why I would say stop the silo thinking. It's easy to say, no, I can't do X, I can't do Y, but I know who can. And I'm thinking this is where we can use ours, and I think there's a big focus of us to be more transversal. Not to say, you know what, let's stick to our lane, DTIC. Our sphere of influence is quite broad. For example, I'm involved now in PE on Transnet issues. Technically speaking, that's not my lane, but it involves trade. And it's a critical enabler of trade. So in short, what I'm trying to say is our approach is very much changing to be more open to having these conversations on how we can facilitate, how we can assist, use our structures. And once again, that's why I put my mobile number there, not my landline. I don't want it to be say, look, you know what, it's 5 o'clock, my line is not available. Contact me, WhatsApp me whenever. Loyolo and his team knows I'm available whenever they are. And I'm opening this up to everybody, because at the end of the day, the information I'm sitting on, the connections we have, the influence we have means nothing to me. You know what I mean? But to you, and I think that's what the approach we are taken from Minister Tau, Whitfield, and our leaders, is to change the way we approach how we assist. And that's why we're saying we're doubling down on our efforts to be more open and available to anybody that needs our assistance. I don't know if if that helps anybody.
It does. It does, Andre. And I think you've made a couple key points. And I think also something important for the structure of the South African Youth Trade Association to take into consideration, that exports doesn't just mean products, okay? That in actual fact, South Africa has a vibrant services export sector, whether it's BPO services or even in fact tourism. Remember, tourism still counts as a services export. So in the context of the support that the South African Youth Trade Association envisions for the future, you know, taking those into consideration, especially given the age demographic and the au faitness with digital technologies, services export, software development, etc. Those should all be part of the structure going forward. I'm also very, very pleased to hear you talking about the eradication of silos. I think that has hampered economic growth in South Africa for a very, very long time. You know, Wesco does one thing, the ECDC does another, and the reality is that they could be more impactful together. So very, very happy to hear that. Anybody else got any questions, statements? Yeah, go ahead.
Just a comment on that. In this week, I had a bruising conversation with ECDC. Yes, I'm in the Eastern Cape, so I will pick on them. And a comment came up here. We must remember we are competitors. And I said, yo, no, stop that. How are we competitors? We got the same targets. I'm sorry, I've got deliverables. I'm only interested in trade, in expanding our and diversifying our base. So yeah, I think that's what I mean by eradicating silos. You know what? It's easy to say no. oh, I don't work with XYZ. No. If our objectives are the same, we should collaborate. And I'm saying is we sit on a wealth of information. People think of us as a finance agency per se. We are not. When it comes to non-proliferation, when it comes to ITEC issues, when it comes to phytosanitary issues, DTIC has influence there, you know. And also, and I think this is indictment on us. We fund inward investment missions. We're hosting the Turkish next week. We're hosting the Saudis the week thereafter. And they're meeting the same old. And I'm saying, as the Youth Trade Association, I want you guys to be there. You may not be ready at this point, and I think that is where other programs talking, but I need you guys to be aware. DTI is having an outreach mission. We're having national pavilions. We're having one in Shanghai. Not one youth enterprise is there. Why not? Because they don't want to be or they didn't know. I think from our side is to double down on inclusion. When we have a list of pavilions coming up, it's being published soon, as well as share, guys, these are the inward investment missions coming in. They're coming to the Western Cape. They're coming to Gauteng. They're coming to Free State. How do we ensure you are present there? And I'm saying this is where another role, it's not financial, but it's awareness to see what's really happening, what opportunities are there. So I'm thinking from my side, I'm going to work very closely. I hope to work closer to share that information, guys. You know, DTIC, we focus on finance, but we also got other opportunities that you need exposure to. And I'm very much open to opening our database and our calendars to you guys. I'll share it with you when they come up. So yeah, thanks. Sorry about that.
Love that. No, love that, Andre. The reality is that if South African exporters win, no matter what province they're from, everyone wins. So yeah, glad to hear you say that. I think I have ran out of time here. So what I'll do is I'll pass over to you, Beauty, and we can get some closing remarks from the AfCFTA. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson and Mr. Andre. Yes, I think we can move to, in fact, we are moving to the closing remarks to be done by the African Continental Free Trade Area. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Beauty. Let me just see if, yes. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Yes. I had actually thought we would give a presentation, but I do understand that since it's closing remarks, I believe that we could have another program where we could give more details of the work of the Secretariat, especially the presentation on women in the protocol on women in youth and trade. However, let me just thank the previous speakers. I think this was a very insightful meeting. And I think from the Secretariat's side, I was really impressed with the work that some of the institutions are actually doing on ground. And I'm seeing an opportunity to leverage and take advantage of, you know, whatever collaboration we can come up with to assist or collaborate in with the implementation of the protocol on women in youth and trade. However, let me just go straight to my closing remarks. I will begin with salutations, of course, to the International Trade Institute of Southern Africa representatives, South Africa Youth Trade Association president and his team, representatives of youth organizations present in this meeting, partners and allied institutions. I thank you for your participation and I greet you this evening. It is with a great pleasure and immense honor that the AfCFTA Secretariat is present in this meeting. This meeting holds enormous significance as we recognize and empower the youth of Africa and their pivotal role in shaping the future of our continent, particularly the future of looking forward to the implementation of the AfCFTA agreement and its protocols. May I also from the onset again thank the SA Youth Trade Association team for organizing this meeting. It comes at a critical time when the AfCFTA Secretariat has actually concluded the negotiations of the first ever protocol on women and youth in trade. I acknowledge the potential of young people in this room, but also in Africa. And also I urge the leaders in this meeting to also acknowledge the power that lies within them. The youth of Africa possess the necessary resilience, and innovation, and determination to lead Africa and the AfCFTA revolution, especially in the context of intra-Africa trade. They are the catalyst and torchbearers of change, capable for transforming Africa's economic landscape. Ladies and gentlemen, currently the continent has the highest youth unemployment levels, especially in the sub-Saharan region, which stood at 48% in the year 2022, against the global average of approximately 17%. The high levels of youth unemployment have been a major source of social life strife among many African young people in African countries. This includes illegal immigration, dangerous attempts to cross the Mediterranean Sea. This has robbed the continent many youthful and innovative youth lives. In some parts of Africa, high levels of unemployment have led to civil and political unrest, a situation that has further accelerated the levels of poverty and low productivity on the continent. I think this can be very much in evidence to what has just happened in Kenya. You will agree with me that the AfCFTA, with a combined population of 1.3 billion people and GDP of approximately $3.5 trillion, provides a necessary conditions for enhancing continental value chains, anchor intra-Africa trade, and of course, anchor value addition. This is key to ensuring that Africa attains the level of industrialization capable for creating jobs for young people and wealth for African citizens necessary to address, it's necessary to address the high levels of unemployment, inequality, and poverty. May I also take this opportunity. I have just given a background of, the necessity of the AfCFTA agreement, its ratification, addressing youth unemployment, and I would like to now share with you what the AfCFTA Secretariat has done in terms of empowering young people and looking into youth and women inclusion within the operations of the AfCFTA and also the AfCFTA framework. Allow me to inform you on the decision of the 35th Ordinary Summit of the African Union Assembly that was held in February 2022 in Addis Ababa, which heads of states, actually, let me recall first, before the 35th Ordinary Summit that was held in 2022, let me recall the 13th Extraordinary Summit that was held virtually when President Ramaphosa was still the African Union chair, when he influenced the heads of states and requested that the protocol on women and youth in trade should be negotiated. He acknowledged the fact that the AfCFTA agreement has gained its attention and mostly support from heads of states, but also recognized that without the involvement of women and youth within this agreement, it will not have its impact in the African continent. And therefore, it was at this 13th Extraordinary Summit that heads of states agreed that the AfCFTA Secretariat shall come up with a protocol on women and youth that will integrate women and youth within the implementation of the AfCFTA agreement. It was then at the 35th Ordinary Summit of the AU Assembly that was held in 2022 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which the heads of states finally assigned the AfCFTA Secretariat to work and begin the negotiations on the protocol on women and youth in trade. The inclusion of the protocol on women and youth in trade within the scope of the AfCFTA the AfCFTA agreement is founded on the commitment, of course, of the AU Assembly to broaden inclusiveness in the operation of the AfCFTA through interventions that support young African women and small and medium enterprises, as well as integrating informal cross-border traders into formal economy by implementing a simplified trade regime. Further, the inclusion of women and youth in the AfCFTA agreement contributes to the broader mission of increasing the role of women across the role of African women across all aspects of development to achieve the agenda, the aspiration 6 of the Agenda 2063, which envisages an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially its women and youth, and caring for children. And of course, the United Nations Development, the Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which talks about attaining gender equality and empower all women and girls by 2030. Therefore, we believe from the AfCFTA Secretariat that this protocol within the AfCFTA framework, it is a testament of our continent's commitment for ensuring that young people are not left behind. But most importantly, it is one of the highest decisions that African heads of states, these are presidents, have ever committed to ensure that this protocol will be implemented, because it is a legally binding protocol. The protocol addresses the reality on ground that women and youth face unique challenges when it comes to participating in trade, entrepreneurship. Overcoming these barriers is not only a matter of gender equality, but we believe it's also critical for our economic progress. Women and youth make up a significant proportion of our African population, and by empowering them, we unlock the potential to become agents of change in Africa, economic drivers and leaders in their respective fields. To fully leverage the benefits of the AfCFTA agreement, we believe that we must eliminate gender equality, in which this is one of the focus of the protocol on women and youth in trade, and improve accessibility, capacity building, and financing opportunities for women and youth in trade. And all these are actually addressed and have provisions under the protocol on women and youth in trade, which actually specify, this provisions actually specify what member states or state parties to the AfCFTA agreement should do on ground to make sure that young people access finance, gender equality is addressed, and improve accessibility to, of course, trade information, trade market on ground. So member states are urged to come up with initiatives that could actually address this, all these issues. I've also spoke about capacity building. The protocol urges member states to make sure that young people are being taught about export readiness, standards of international trade, but also on its own, what is the AfCFTA, what is the protocol on women and youth in trade, and what does the protocol actually have for young people. We need to remove these barriers that hinder young people's participation. That should the protocol actually urges member states to enhance young people and women and SME skills and knowledge on entrepreneurship, so that they can be able to contribute or participate fully into cross-border trade. This protocols actually calls for targeted initiatives, including mentorship programs, incubators, support networks, and also to nurture and amplify the potential of women and youth in trade. It seeks to promote gender-responsive policies that provides equitable access to markets, capital, and technology. It is crucial that we also place a strong emphasis on promoting, of course, the digital literacy, e-commerce skills among women and youth. As you may know, ladies and gentlemen, that the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade has also been adopted, but also on this one, the Protocol on Digital Trade has actually been adopted. So it means that member states are also very much urged to carry out capacity buildings on digital literacy so that the young people can be able to benefit from all the provisions that favor them under the Protocol on Digital Trade. Moreover, this protocol aims to encourage governments and private sector entities to establish mechanisms and platforms that facilitate, of course, meaningful participation of women and youth in trade. Let me also share with you that the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade is a legally binding protocol, meaning that heads of states that have negotiated this protocol, which I could also mention in this meeting that these are heads of states that also that have ratified the AfCFTA agreement itself, understands that there may be consequences that they may be posed to if they are not able to implement some of the provisions under the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade. The protocol was successfully adopted earlier this year in February during the 37th Ordinary Summit, where both the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade and Digital Trade were successfully adopted. But also, let me also share with you that the AfCFTA Secretariat under the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade, Article 4.4, had requested that the Secretariat should develop a ministerial regulation as an annex to the protocol. This is one of the first implementation strategies of the protocol. We are currently developing a ministerial regulation on preferential market access for women and youth in trade. And I have just returned from Mozambique, where member states have deliberated on this ministerial regulation. And therefore, this is one of our first implementation strategy of the protocol. The ministerial regulation will be signed by all ministers of trade, of course. That actually indicates that that would actually commit to say that, of course, our presidents have ratified to the protocol on to the AfCFTA agreement. We as the member states recognize the importance of the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade, and we are committing to implementing this protocol through the following parts, which are actually stipulated in the ministerial regulation. Also, perhaps before I conclude my closing remarks, let me also share with you some of the initiatives that the AfCFTA Secretariat has actually engaged on when it comes to youth empowerment and engagement. Prior to negotiating the Protocol on Women and Youth in Trade, of course, we have held national consultations through member states who have actually put together young people in their countries that are involved either in business, who have businesses that have potential to trade across borders, but also with those young people who are already on ground trading across borders, carrying out national consultations to find out what are the actual problems that are actually facing on ground when they are trying to carry out their day-to-day trade. And we also had from national consultations with few countries, we also had regional, where we partnered with regional economic communities on how, where we gathered, of course, young people who are majorly into trade within their regional economic communities. We also further on the last consultations that we did before the negotiations held, that the Women and Youth in Trade Conference that was held in Tanzania last year, where we had separate roundtables on women and youth. And I think this one was very important for us as the facilitators of the negotiations, because it brought young people across the continent together to now deliberate on what issues are they envisioning they could face when they trade under the AfCFTA. And this, of course, was guided by all those challenges they have encountered when they were trading, within their regions. So we were able to take all these recommendations and put them in the draft protocol that was negotiated by member states. It was not easy, of course, but I can assure you that for the first time ever in the history of negotiating trade agreements, we have seen that member states were also very keen to send their chief negotiators from ministries of trade, but these chief negotiators were coming with young people to these meetings. We have never had private sector in negotiations before, but with the Women and Youth in Trade protocol, member states realized that we are not going to send only trade negotiators who have been negotiating all the trade agreements or protocols to this protocol. We believe that they can be guided better when they are with a young person in this meeting or an association in this meeting. So that is the process that we actually carried out or we took prior to the negotiations. And we also now, after the adoption of the protocol on women and youth in trade, continued our engagement with the young people. And I'm very happy that we are now here at the Secretariat as, now being introduced to the South Africa Youth in Trade Association, because we are looking forward to the implementation of this protocol. And we're actually looking forward to increasing our database of young people who are actually working on, youth economic empowerment in their countries. Last year, we had our first ever AfCFTA Youth Symposium, which was actually the first initiative to try to bring young people together across the continent, especially those in business, in trade, and those in championing business supporting organizations or social entrepreneurs in the sector of youth in trade. Yes, and the main outcome of the AfCFTA Youth Symposium that was held in Zambia last year was the young people deliberated and recommended that a committee on women in youth and trade should be formed. So we then formed a task force. Apologies, allow me to charge my laptop. Yes. Okay. Yes, the outcomes of the AfCFTA Youth Symposium that was held in Zambia last year, we had came up with a youth task force team that would guide the Secretariat on how to carry out its AfCFTA Youth Symposium yearly. What the task force team does mostly is that they guide the Secretariat on the topics that they feel they need to be addressed, and they also
Chair, I think the speaker might have fallen off.
Yes. I also take that program director over to you, because I'm also checking time.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It's just unfortunate that Ms. Konaya had to be cut off here. I'm not sure what happened. However, this brings us to the end of our capacity building workshop. And I would like to thank all the presenters